Hi folks, Eric Carlson here. I am running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District of Illinois. This is video 11 in our series of problems and solutions to let the voters know where I stand on different subjects and my thoughts on a lot of things that face this country and especially the people of the 1st District. So in this video we're going to discuss China. Now, I know this is the national level. This is a foreign policy thing, which is what Congress deals with also outside of the local things. I know there's a lot of people, especially in the city of Chicago, who have a lot more pressing issues right in front of them. But this does affect everyone in this country. And I'm going to go through a few reasons why. This needs to be dealt with. And unfortunately, what you're getting out of Joe Biden, who we haven't seen the investigation because anything on Hunter Biden's laptop and Joe's actual business ties and the monetary ties that he has with China, none of that has been exposed. So I'm hoping that when the Republicans take back the majority of the House and the Senate in November, that, or actually when they're sworn in January, but after the November elections, that we will get some serious investigations. And the American people deserve to know everything that went on during this current administration and what went on prior to that against Donald Trump and all the things that happened there. We already know this country has, instead of letting somebody just do their job for 4 years and then challenging them on whether they accomplished anything or not, the Democrats had to drag this country through a whole lot of pain, not get a lot of things done, and open us up to this danger right here. So I'm going to go point by point here with the stuff on China. I'm actually going to bring the camera in a little bit. I apologize for that glare on there. I can't. That's from the camera phone. So we'll start out here. In case you didn't realize, we are already at war with China. Well, the Chinese are at war with us. The people that we have in leadership positions, I don't call them leaders. They are in leadership positions, but that doesn't mean anything. These people are letting you down right now. They're leaving us basically naked and open to Chinese aggression. Look at what the Chinese have done to us in the last 2 years. They've killed 800,000 Americans because of COVID. And they did that. And I'm going to do a separate video on COVID, so I won't go into it here. But you have 800,000 Americans dead. That's more Americans than were killed in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and the Gulf War, and Afghanistan and Iraq. The Chinese have weakened this country by taking 800,000 of our fellow countrymen. The fentanyl and drug overdose epidemic. Last year, 2021, we broke 100,000 deaths from overdoses. And a lot of those, the majority of them were opioid deaths, and a lot of those were fentanyl. They're spiking a lot of things. Well, most of the fentanyl is coming in from China, and it comes in over the border from Mexico, which is another reason why you need a secure border. And the Chinese are doing this on purpose. If they can rot this country from the inside out by getting your kids hooked on drugs, and I'm going to go through this point by point. This is such a big problem. It's hard to cover everything in a video. This is just a brief synopsis of what's going on in here. You could talk about this for literally days to get down to it, but I don't think a lot of people in the 1st District are paying too much attention to this because the Democrats keep throwing racism, telling you white supremacy is your problem, and that's what's gonna hurt the people of the 1st District. Well, they're lying to you, folks. And you know this. All you have to do is look around. You know the real deal. So the fentanyl, they're killing Americans right now. Now the Chinese have a Belt and Road policy where they go into third world countries in Africa and Central America and in the Middle East, and it's basically colonization, because the way they do it is they'll go into a country and they'll tell that country, a poor third world country, that what we're going to do is we're going to build you an airport, we're going to build you a port, you're going to have economic development, and you only have to pay us this much over time. The Chinese knowing full well that they're not going to be able to pay that, and in the fine print it will be, if you can't pay us back, we get all the rights to your natural resources, your whatever you have, whether it's precious metals, oil, natural gas, lumber, anything that you have that they want, you're going to have to sign that over to them. And if you look at how they build these installations, the ports and the airports, what can those be used as? Forward military staging bases. The Chinese actually just built their first port on the east coast, or excuse me, the west coast of Africa, which gives them access, if they wanted to turn that into a naval base. And now they have access for the first time ever to the Atlantic Ocean. They can actually steam into the Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico. They can use it as a submarine base to get close to the United States. And we're going to go into that more, what they've developed in the while the U.S. was worrying about stupid stuff and the people at the top were arguing amongst themselves. China, for the longest time, had a one-child policy because they were worried about their overpopulation and being able to feed their people. If there's one thing that communists fear, it's their own people rising up. So if they couldn't feed the people, they don't want to get their heads chopped off by their own populace. So they wanted to cut the population back to try and, it's very hard to, when your population grows that fast, to find work for these people. And if you can't find work for them, people get restless and they get angry. And if you can't feed them, they really get angry and they're left no choices. But the Chinese just announced that they shortly, a little while ago, they started with a 3-child policy. So they want every couple to produce 3 kids, which means now with the 1-child policy, they kind of shot themselves in the foot because boys were considered more economically productive to a family. So a lot of the female children were either aborted or killed as children so that the family could have their one child, that be a male. So you have an imbalance of males to females in that country right now. So they're trying to get that back in line. But also, if you have an excess of males, what do you have an excess of? Well, people that you don't really need if they can't mash up. So you have a lot of cannon fodder there. If you were to have military ventures, you can afford to lose. And this has always been the way with the Soviet Union, and the communists do not care about their own people. Sacrificing their own people means that's less that they have to feed. They do not care about the individual like we do here in the United States. They are willing to take those casualties and losses. It doesn't matter to them. So with the 3-child policy, that means they're going to increase their population. They're already the most populous country in the world. They're at about 1.4 to 1.5 billion right now. They increase that number. How are they going to feed them? Where are they going to put them? Adolf Hitler came up with, we need living room, living space. That's what started World War II. Oh, we'll move into the Sudetenland and in Czechoslovakia. We need space, and these people speak German anyway. Well, where are you going to put all these newly minted Chinese? Well, you are colonizing all these third world countries. Is it possible? And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is how you would play this out if you were actually trying to take over the entire world. And for people out there who think that's irrational and that sounds over the top, men have tried it throughout history. From Alexander the Great, the Persians, they tried to conquer the known world, what they knew at the time. When we knew more about it, Adolf Hitler tried to conquer the world. Stalin, if we weren't standing in his way, would have tried to conquer the world. Everybody, the Egyptians, the Romans, the Greeks, everyone has tried at one time or another to conquer what they knew as the known world. It boils down to not a country or a people, what they think. It boils down to one person at the top usually, and that's Xi. Just like Hitler. And the Chinese normally have a long plan. They play a long game. We think in election cycles, 2 and 4 years. They think 50 and 100 years ahead of time. And they've been doing this for the longest time. And I've said this for the longest time when we were kids. You remember all the toys with lead paint. And it's just, bad production quality over there, and they didn't mean to do it. A few years back, we had a case where a bunch of drywall, sheetrock came in from China, and they put it up in a bunch of houses down in Florida, and it turns out it contained a chemical that caused cancer. All those houses had to be abandoned. All the brand new houses, a whole subdivision. But it's stuff like that. If they can sneak these products in a little bit at a time, if you could do something like that, if you could slip enough stuff in to where you could get American kids, say, for instance, going back with lead paint, if you could get, over the years, if you could get the average American IQ to drop by 5 points, it's much easier to influence people like that. And now you're starting to see they control Google and all these other big companies who are in it for nothing but the money. When they go over there, they have to sign over all this stuff. Google has worked with the Chinese on facial recognition. They're working with them on AI technology. And they're not going to use it for good. It's some bad stuff that can come down from this. But we'll try and stay on track here. So the Chinese, the military buildup. Some of you may have seen the Chinese now have hypersonic missiles, deployable hypersonic missiles. We're still in the testing phase. We don't have them ready to go, which means basically your hands are in your pocket. The other guy can hit you anytime he wants, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. This is a first strike weapon. There is no reason to develop these unless you plan to use them. That's flat out. So while you have the advantage, before we can catch up, because they said we're still 3 years behind. We're still 3 years behind. So what's going on right now with Taiwan? You may have the ability to do that. A hypersonic missile would mean that it would fly at low altitude. We would not be able to detect it because it's moving too fast. And it could launch, and you could have an EMP strike in the United States, electromagnetic pulse, which would knock out the power grid to this country. Now, these studies have already been done recently in this country. What would happen if the EMP knocked out the power grid in this country? Now, of course, our military would retaliate, but that wouldn't do anything for the American people. They estimate that, I believe it was in the first year, due to disease and lack of food, because everything shuts down, folks. Nothing's going to the grocery store. No trucks are moving. When an EMP hits, it fries all electronics. So all your cars that run with computers in them, all that stuff is fried. So none of that stuff is moving. 90% of the American population, they estimate, would die in the first year from disease and starvation. 90%. That I understand all the other things, and you have to live your daily life and focus on the things that are right in front of you, but you also have to think about these bigger things because they affect you. In the military, our first rule of thumb is always security. That's number one. Before you do anything else, before you clean your weapon or eat or get any sleep or anything, it's security. You put your claymore mines out, you put your listening posts out, and you have 50% security watching the line while one guy sleeps or one guy eats. If you don't have this security at a national level, you're vulnerable. And that leaves all of us vulnerable. And when I watch C-SPAN and I see these people in Congress right now argue back and forth, Democrats and Republicans, the Republicans seem to get it. There's a few that are kind of wishy-washy that just, it's like they don't have the stomach. They just enjoy being there and being in Congress rather than actually trying to get the serious stuff taken care of. Like I said, hypersonic missiles are a first strike weapon. They have them. The Russians have them now also. But the Russians also have a much better submarine fleet. The Russians could actually get them off our coast, off our east coast if they wanted to, and hit the United States. That's a long shot, but the ability is there, and that's the problem. We are vulnerable right now. There was a hack. I don't know if you remember last year when all 15 of our major federal agencies were hacked, and they don't know how serious it was, and they don't know. They believe it was the Russians, so we don't know what they got from us, what they know. So the government's not telling us. Are our pants down? Are we that vulnerable? What do they know about our readiness? What our weaknesses are, where they can hit us. So there's just so much going on the global, on the national level, that people need to think about this. Like I said, worry about the stuff that's in front of you, but you have to know about this stuff. You have to be an educated voter. People that are going to run for this first congressional district, they're going to come and they're going to give you platitudes. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about local issues, which is, we're going to take care of those too, but you have to have the big picture. If you don't have any knowledge of the way these things work, you're not helping. So we'll keep going here. In economic war, well, we're vulnerable right now. We're very vulnerable because of the current policies that we have. Joe Biden is most likely compromised. But in an economic war, and I'll show you under the solutions, I'll go in more into that. But the Russia Pact, recently China and Russia made a pact, a non-aggression pact. The last time that term was used was between Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, when they agreed not to attack each other, so Hitler could attack Poland from one side and Stalin the other. And then that allowed Hitler to not have to watch his back, to turn around and go through the Low Countries into France, and then go after Great Britain. And then he turned around and went right after the Soviets anyway. Operation Barbarossa, 1941. The Chinese, in my view, What the Chinese are doing right now with the Russians in Ukraine is the Russians, they're using them as their little dog to send out, like they do with North Korea. They send them out there. Oh, we make a pact. Yeah, you're good. Go ahead and push NATO, push the West, and see how far you can get. And if it winds up in a shooting war, the Europeans are so wishy-washy. I don't think they have a stomach for a fight. And anyway, the Germans, what they just did when Joe Biden gave permission for the Nord Stream pipeline to basically fuel Germany, our biggest ally, the most powerful and richest country in Europe, you just gave them a stranglehold because that oil comes from Russia. All the heating. Right now in the winter, the Russians could turn around and say, NATO, if you step in here, Germany, we're cutting off your gas. That's it. You guys are going to freeze for this winter. Figure it out. So the Germans don't want to do that. The fact that a NATO ally made themselves that vulnerable to what is basically an enemy of ours right now. And the Russians shouldn't be our enemy. We should have been working with the Russians a long time ago. Donald Trump told that, and they said, oh, he's in bed with Putin. He wasn't in bed with Putin. He just realized that, we've got a lot more in common than a lot of the Russians have a problem with Muslim, Middle Eastern terrorists also. That's just the way it is. You can work together on a lot of stuff, but we poo-pooed that, and you guys, on the left all had to say that it was Donald Trump and Putin Donald Trump killed more Russians than any American president since, 1919, when we, Operation Archangel, when we actually, after the First World War, during the Bolshevik Revolution, the Western powers actually sent troops into Archangel, Russia. And actually, my grandfather's original regiment was there. So, 339th Infantry. That's why they got the nickname Polar Bears. That's your history lesson for the day, folks. Sorry. So this dual aggression, where China may move on Taiwan and the Russians may move on Ukraine, we can no longer fight a two front war. It always used to be the policy. When I was in the military, it was the policy that we could fight and win two major wars simultaneously, just like we did during the Second World War. And then because budget cuts, they said, okay, we'll be able to fight one major war and one small war and win both of those. And then it went down to, well, we'll just be able to fight one major war at a time, and then we'll have to wait on the other stuff or depend on allies and everything. They've cut back so much that we no longer have what we need. Under Ronald Reagan, we had a 600-ship Navy. You know what? Sorry, I'll save all that for my military video. Sorry, I got a little off track there. So, global currency. If Chinese currency replaces the dollar as the global currency, that is really going to crush our economy. You're going to pay more for everything. A lot of people don't realize this, but the dollar is the reserve currency for the world. Everything, oil on the open market, everywhere in the world is dealt with in dollars. You can pull out a dollar anywhere in the world, and that will get you something. That will buy you something. A United States dollar. You go to the reserve currency, a lot of that changes. It'll still be worth some, but it will weaken this country greatly. Xi, like I said, it comes down to the man. It comes down to the individual personality. And this guy wants to conquer the world. They don't want to do it by fighting. That's the last thing they want to do. The actual fighting they would want to do would be the coup de grace. At the end, the finish, put the gun to our head and boom, it's done. The Chinese work, I forget how many thousands of different coronaviruses that they said they had in Wuhan, besides the one they released here. This might have been a test. My personal feeling is that it got away from them, got out of the lab, got away from them, and they realized, well, if this hits us real hard and we contain it, that's going to put a crimp in our plans for a little while. But if it's going to hurt us, we should probably let it out to the rest of the world so it hurts everybody equally, so we don't lose any ground on our plan for all the stuff that we've got in line. So again, I'll go into that in the COVID video. But for our solutions over here, let me give you a little turn here. Solutions. First thing is going to be close and secure the U.S. border. That's going to stop your fentanyl coming in. They actually, the other day, they had a group of 400 illegals cross the border. They had two back-to-back nights, 400 and 400. The second group, they had 2 Chinese nationals in there. Well, I don't think those guys are coming here to go to college. You don't know what they are. You don't know if they're saboteurs. You don't know if they're spies. You have no idea what they're doing. They may be coming for work, but I highly doubt it. Um, so you need to close and secure the border. Besides that, we open it to terrorists from all over the world. There's people all over the world who hate us. Um, you can turn around to the Chinese and say, listen, you've stolen intellectual property from our corporations for so long. So we're going to value that and what you did to us with Corona here. We know you're not gonna. We know you're not gonna pay us back. So what we're gonna do is we owe them. I believe it's over $1 trillion. I believe it's about $1.5 trillion, and we have to pay interest on that. So we're paying interest on that debt plus we owe them that. So we cancel that. And some people will say, well, what that would do is that would make the U.S. Their word in for debt would not, our word wouldn't be any good anymore. That's not true. We tell the rest of the world, listen, this is what happened. Take the case to the rest of the world. They've stolen X amount of dollars from us over the years from intellectual property theft, as they've done with everyone else. So this is their penalty. No more money for them. We shouldn't be funding them building these missiles, which is what we're doing by paying them interest on these loans. So to counter the expansion, we do that through engagement in these third world countries. We get our people on the ground there to talk to these people and, hey, let them know what's going on and work with them like we used to do. There's a group in the United States Army called Special Forces, otherwise known as the Green Berets. They're part of the Special Operations Command. Their sole mission used to be what they would do is foreign internal defense, and also they're basically diplomats in fatigues. They go over and they work with these people. They can inoculate kids. They can help villages build wells. What they do is they set up a good rapport with people in the countries and show them the American way of life and let them know, hey, this is what the Chinese are going to do. The Chinese are going to come in and take your stuff, because when the Chinese build these ports, they don't build it with a lot of local labor. What they do is they bring Chinese over, build compounds for them, and then have them work to build the things. Well, now you've got a ready-made group of people they're colonizing already. Let's just say they came up with another coronavirus and they decided to release it in Africa, but they had a vaccine for it for their own people. You could wipe out a large swath of the population in Africa, and the Chinese would populate it, move their people in. I know a lot of people will say, hey, that seems far-fetched. Absolutely not. If you've got the largest population in the world, you have the people to do this. You're already there. They've already got the bases. They're already in this. If you don't think that world domination gets in some men's minds, they're going to be, if they make it to be the top economic power in the world, what's to stop? If they're the number one military, the number one economy, and they can pressure. Once you get that big, you can start pressure, just like the Russians are doing with Germany. The Chinese are going to be able to do that with everyone who has to trade with them. That's why the Europeans who got in too far trading with them, now they have to think before they make a move. Rather than saying, hey, we're just going to back up the United States, they're kind of caught betwixt and between. They're waiting to see what happens. That's because weak leadership, or lack thereof, at the top in this country has led to people questioning whether we're going to be there. If the Chinese move on Taiwan, we have two choices. Either we're going to go to war to defend Taiwan, or we're not going to go to war and we're just going to sit there and twiddle our thumbs. If we do that, we lose face on the world stage, which I know a lot of people in the neighborhoods don't care about this stuff. It matters. Believe me, it matters. It will affect your life deeply. The way you live, the way you can get goods, it will affect your life deeply. If we go to war with them, we better win it. And it could go nuclear. So if a lot of bad stuff comes from weakness. If you are weak, if you project weakness, and if possibly your president is compromised through economic deals, corrupt things that he did with the Chinese government, that they have information on him and Hunter Biden. The FBI has his laptop. Why haven't we heard that report? They told you it was Russian disinformation. We all know that's a lie. It's sitting there right at the FBI. It's never been denied by Hunter Biden that was his. We need to know this, and this is why you send congressmen to Washington too, to get to the bottom of why people that have been there, Joe Biden, for 50 years, held Senate offices, the vice presidency, and now the presidency, and he's corrupt as all day long. This guy is corrupt, and I will say that to his face. And when this comes out, people, when everything comes out in the next 10, 15, 20 years, You know, I don't want to say I told you so, but common sense. Just look at logic and reason. Connect the dots and look what makes sense. So the next thing we do here, yeah, we already said we're going to counter Chinese expansion with American special forces and American aid through food. And the way you do that, and it's not going to cost us a whole lot because you've got a bunch of farmers now who, if we get in an economic war with them, we're going to have a lot of extra, rather than dumping our stuff or paying farmers not to farm, let the farmers farm. Any excess, the government can go ahead and buy. That surplus will go, it will pay for itself in the long run by going to these third world countries and showing them that, hey, America's with you. Don't side with the Chinese. You have to have this. A PSYOP, you need to win over the Chinese people. And this is huge. We used to do this back, you know, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. We would, and this is not about overthrowing a government. A lot of people say, well, the Chinese will never go for that. Hey, we used to have a thing called Voice of America Radio. This was just a broadcast that we would send out to people all over the world to give them it was literally the voice of America. This is what you're missing. This is how you're being hurt by the regime that's keeping you down right now. Things could be so much better, and let the people in those countries fight for change. Not necessarily armed change, but you'd have something again like Tiananmen Square, you know, in Beijing, where people rose up and they actually, I mean, you saw what they did to them in Taiwan. They're going to steamroll these people. But if you have that many people and they finally turn, just like the Russians, when you saw the Russians turn, when they had their little coup there in the 90s, the Russian soldiers refused to fight. They were told to fire on Russian civilians, Soviet civilians, and they refused. The soldiers said, absolutely not, we're not doing it. If it gets to a point, hopefully the Chinese military will say, listen, we can compete with the Americans, but there's no reason to go to war with them. And there's no reason to be shooting our own people in the street. This has gone too far. But when you get someone in power like that, who has the power of life and death, you know, a dictator, he is a dictator. If you want to look at the parallels, you've already got the concentration camps with the Uyghurs that we know about. You've already got aggression on his part. You've already got subjugation of the people on Taiwan, the violation of the treaty that they had with Hong Kong. The violation of the treaty they had with the British in Hong Kong. They cracked down on them there. There's no pro-democracy. You're going to prison. You're going away in a cell somewhere, if not a bullet in the back of the head. So the Chinese are not our friends, people. Not the Chinese people. The Chinese Communist Party. They are the enemy, and they are at war with you. Whether you realize it or not, they want to be number one. And we just seem to be, you know, arguing over stupid stuff that doesn't matter. You know, we're arguing over, is it 72 or 73 genders that we have? You got to be out of your mind. This is literally Nero fiddling while Rome burned. You know, if this keeps going the way it is, this is the last days of the Roman Empire. America will decline, just like Great Britain declined. All societies supposedly decline. There's no reason this one has to. We're not at that point. But the people that are in charge now are leading us down that road unnecessarily. And this is one of the main reasons that I'm running. The people there, the majority of them are not leaders. And the thing is that the American people don't know that, because for the longest time, the American people have not seen real leaders. And unfortunately, most people don't know what a real leader looks like. I'm going to do a video on leadership in a little bit. So try and get through this. I'm sorry this one's going long, but I just wanted to get this out there because this is the single biggest problem. This is, when they call it an existential threat, that means it's a threat to your existence. Your very existence depends on this. Literally, your life and death out there depends on what happens here, and having strong people in power to counter this in this country. Remove 350,000 Chinese students. You have 350,000 Chinese college students in our universities right now. According to the Chinese government, every single one of them is supposed to spy for the home country. So you have 350,000 potential spies. Now, we've already had incidents at Harvard and a lot of the major universities that do research. And this research is used in our military and in our infrastructure. They're selling these secrets. They're taking them back to China, and they're copying the stuff that we have. Have you seen Chinese new stealth fighter? Looks remarkably like an F-22. Almost an exact copy. Chinese have been doing this for 75 years, folks. 75 years. They used to copy all the Soviet stuff and make it. The Russian AK-47 became the Chinese Type 56 assault rifle. Exact same thing. They just copied it. And they've done it with jets all the way from bottom to top. That's the only way they can do stuff. But now they're getting to a point where they can produce their own stuff, like this hypersonic missile. They outdid us. They outdid us. We took our eyes off the ball with all this stupid stuff, and now we're gonna pay the price. Somebody's got a gun to our head right now. So these students need to be sent home right away, sent back to China. Sorry, this is part of the whole thing. Until you come clean, until you admit that you stole all the stuff and pay us back for all that, we're not getting back on a good footing with you. But before you do all this, there's a couple of things you got to do, because we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable in a lot of spots. So we need to have an alliance, and India is the second most populous country in the world. We need to have it's right on the Chinese border. They're the only ones who can match them man for man in a land war, which the Indian military isn't as large and it isn't as advanced. But what do they have to lose? They are a democracy. They are technically the world's largest democracy because of population. So these are people we want to have on our side. Japan, solid ally. South Korea, we bring Taiwan in. We tell the Chinese flat out, hey, all these countries are together. You're not touching Taiwan. Don't do it. If you do it, game on. That's how you have to talk. That's the only thing they're going to respect. If you give them, like Biden is giving in Ukraine right now, if you give them signals, well, if you do this, we might not, we don't know what we're going to do yet. That's weakness. And it's the same thing. You can equate this to what happens on the street. Who do people go after? Who do criminals go after? Weak people, vulnerable people, people who have their money hanging out of their pocket, people doing stupid stuff, people who look like they can't defend themselves, like they can't make up their mind what they're going to do. That's exactly what we are right now with Joe Biden and the Democrats. Everyone he's got in that White House running that thing. None of them have a clue. So you got your alliance with all these people, including New Zealand, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Now, a lot of people say, how do we get in with Vietnam? Well, because the Chinese and the Vietnamese have always fought. They actually fought right after the Vietnam War in 1975 when the U.S. left. They had a border war between China and Vietnam. A lot of people don't know that. There's bad blood there. So the Vietnamese are not necessarily, even though the Chinese supported them against the United States, because that was, the enemy of my enemy is my friend at the time. So all these countries together, we can use that to counter China in that area. But you have to do it. You have to take the leadership role. You're the only one. I mean, India is a nuclear power, but they've only got about 100 nuclear weapons, which, it's enough. It'll get the job done. But again, China with the hypersonic missiles may be able to take that threat out before, we are just our own hypersonic missile program. They said it won't be fielded for like a year and a half to 2 years. They'll have the first one the Navy will have. So we're behind them. So until we catch up. So you have to kick in right now like a Manhattan style project where you just put a ton of money into this and get it up there. Because until we can say, hey, they've got a gun to our head and we've got a gun to their head, then nobody's going to pull the trigger. It worked with Soviets for the longest time. But when the other guy has a gun and you have just your finger, it doesn't work. You're at the mercy. So all critical production needs to come back to this country and North America. And this is something that I've preached for the longest time, that the things that we need in this country to operate, like if the electrical grid did go down, even a huge winter ice storm, when they destroy like the large transformers and the stuff that carries our stuff, carries electricity to all our homes, we don't even have the ability to manufacture those in this country right now. All those huge transformers are made in China. So if the people want to knock out our grid, and it's the same people that we have to get the replacement stuff from, we're kind of stuck. All this production needs to be brought back to the United States. The United States must be secure and 100% self-reliable. I'm going to say this. We should have we have a trade agreement, but we should have a North American Defense Pact between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Because when the rest of the world does go to shit, we need to be able to rely on our neighbors. And what this would do is, I would suggest to the Mexican president, I would send a delegation from Congress down to talk to them with the permission of the president and to say, listen, we're going to bring back all the high tech stuff is going to come back to the United States, but we need stuff manufactured. If we could get it manufactured in Mexico, this would give a lot of jobs. This would boost the economy of Mexico too. That would help us greatly because it would reduce our border problem, if not totally eliminate it. The Mexican people would be better off. Their economy would be better. You would be able to cut down on a lot of the drug fucking trafficking. Excuse my language. Sorry about that. Sometimes the ranger slips out. Um, but if you could bring the drug manufacturing, which is, we learned this during COVID, that 90% of our drugs are manufactured in China. Think about that. Think about how many Americans are on medication. It's well over half of Americans take some type of medication. And a lot of it is life-saving medication necessary to keep people alive. If the Chinese wanted in a war, and this is what I mean, and Donald Trump brought this up, he wanted to bring this production back. It hasn't been done yet. This needs to be done right away. Bring this production of everything that we rely on that's made in China and overseas, people who are hostile to us, bring that back here. That's the only way we'll be secure. And like I said, a strong Mexico and a prosperous Mexico benefits us. Just like I go in the economy here on the south side, when you bring in a neighborhood that's having trouble like Inglewood or Rosewood, when you make it safe and you bring these jobs and the companies back in, and then you bring up everybody's standard of living, then the crime gradually goes away. And then you don't have to worry about the shootings and stuff.